Hello and welcome. I am Lekon Onobanjo. Here are stories making rounds beyond the continent. We begin with the latest on the war on Ukraine. The European Union has approved a new package of sanctions against Russia, marking the 18th round of economic measures since the start of the war in Ukraine in 2022. This latest package includes a reduction in the price cap on Russian oil exports to countries outside the bloc, now set at 15% below global market value. The sanctions were passed after Slovakia lifted its veto following negotiations with Brussels over a separate agreement to gradually phase out Russian gas imports by 2027. The measures aim to further restrict Russia's financial capability to sustain its military efforts. EU officials say the move underscores their continued commitment to supporting Ukraine and maintaining pressure on Moscow to end its aggression. Meanwhile, the UK has joined new EU sanctions targeting Russia oil exports. British Finance Minister Rachel Reeves says the move will ramp up economic pressure on Moscow by slashing a price cap meant to choke off revenues from key oil exports. The measures come as allies closely watch whether U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to punish Moscow over Russian President Vladimir Putin's failure to move forward on a truce.
Today we've announced a reduction in the oil price cap that applies to Russian exports of oil, a reduction from $60 per barrel to $47.60 a barrel. That's a significant reduction, and this is about ratcheting up the pressure on Russia to reduce their ability to fund their war effort. And this is all about Britain standing with our friends and allies in Ukraine to put them in the strongest possible position against Russia's illegal invasion. The important thing about what we have announced today is that we have taken these steps in conjunction with our allies in the European Union. So this is not Britain acting alone. This is a partnership with our European allies to put maximum pressure on Russia and reduce their ability to fund their war effort. The oil price cap that's been in place since 2022 has already had an impact on reducing Russian oil revenues, but today we are going further to support Ukraine and to put pressure on Russia.
Thank you, Minister.
Now, joining us from Washington in USA is Tabaying Echu, who is a global affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Tabaying, for joining us on the news. Tabaying, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so according to the EU, these latest sanctions are the harshest, but can they weaken Russia's resolve against Ukraine?
I mean, we should not even, first of all, forget that in December of 2022, the G7 limited the sales of Russian oil to $60, which was largely symbolic because crude oil is the main money maker for Russia. But Russia found a way against it and circumvented the whole sanction regime, started trading with China. Let's see if this one is going to have an impact.
Well, these are penalties that cut across energy, banking, military, and trade. And interestingly, all 27 EU countries have trade relations with Russia. So won't the union members also be hurt?
I think let's look at why are they imposing these sanctions. Is it designed to collapse the Russian economy or end the war? Or it is just to send a very strong message that Russia is part of the international community and you cannot violate the national sovereignties of other countries and go just for free. It is undeniable that these sanctions have inflicted some pain on the Russian economy, but they have not brought an end to the war in Ukraine. They have not collapsed the Russian economy. So these piecemeal deals that they are doing, or these sanction regimes that they are putting, it really don't seem to have the desired effect. And do not forget, a lot of these Western countries, even the European countries, have exceptions on some of these sanctions. that they can still buy the Russian gas, they can still buy oil from Russia, and then it is very difficult for you to target Russia because they have a lot of these other commodities that they trade with: wheat, agricultural products, and a whole lot of critical minerals that they put into the international market. So it's very difficult because some of these countries depend on what is coming from Russia. So at the end of the day, they're still going to find a way to engage in trade with Russia.
And we understand that these sanctions will not only affect Russia, but also its local and international diplomatic and business proxies. But Russia has BRICS and other continental partners, just as you have mentioned, some other European countries that might equally still want to trade with it. Can it survive this economic ban by the EU?
I think they have demonstrated so far since 2022 to withstand all of these sanction regimes. And I think as of Friday, the spokesman from Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, said Russia has built up an immunity to these Western sanctions. If you even look at prior to even 2022, they spent years building more than 600 billion in their central bank reserves, which have not been affected so far. Part of it have been, but majority of it is still intact. And they are actively engaging in trading in rubles and even yuan with the Chinese. So it is really, really very difficult to find something that is going to actually work to get the Russians to stop the war in Ukraine. Something really away from the sanction regimes is necessary. I don't think that the sanction regimes has worked, or is working, or is going to work in the future, because if that has been the case, for 4 years now, they have, every time they put out a sanction regime, they're going to say this is the most toughest. But you see that Russia is even increasing their attacks on the Ukrainian people.
And we are not so sure about Donald Trump, the U.S. president, if he will be adding to that pressure by implementing his own sanctions. But then Vladimir Putin has been defiant towards previous punitive measures, part of what you just mentioned. How do you expect him to now respond to these new rules by the EU?
Again, I think they have also diversified their international business partners. Most of their trade is in Asia now, between them, Chinese, and the Indians. So a lot of the bravado that you're seeing coming from Washington, D.C., you should understand that a lot of this is geopolitics. And they still communicate in the background with the Russians. If this was really something that they wish to do, you can tell them in 50 days. You are giving them time to prepare. What is the essence? If you're going to hit them hard with tariffs or secondary tariffs targeted to countries that are doing business with them, why do you preview them? You got to go ahead and do it so that they wake up in the morning, something hits them from where they don't know. But this is just like marketing that you're already telling them that we are coming. Get ready, and definitely the Russians are ready.
Now, looking at the end game, Tabangeng, now a school of thought believes that disciplinary measures aimed at pressuring Russia to end its offensive on Ukraine will instead truncate the peace talks or the peace deals that mediators are trying to achieve. Do you think so too?
But it's hard for this to happen, given that we live in a world that when you're working with the Chinese, definitely the Chinese pretend they're not working with the U.S. when they're working with the U.S. So you have everybody looking for a share of influence. It is hard for the Europeans alone. The question we should be asking ourselves, how come it is the Western governments and the U.S. that are much more focused on these sanction regimes and not China or India, or some of the countries that make up the BRICS countries that Russia is part of. So it is very difficult for some of these sanctions to really be effective if you do not have a collective of the global community that would focus these sanctions on them. So there need to be an alternative solution to these than just the sanction regimes.
All right, Taveya Ngechu, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Now, to the U.S., Republicans early on Friday approved President Donald Trump's plan to cancel $9 billion in funding for foreign aid and public broadcasting. This is, as it vowed, it was just the start of broader efforts by Congress to slash the federal budget. The cuts achieve only a tiny fraction of the $1 trillion in annual savings that tech billionaire and estranged Trump donor Elon Musk vowed to find before his acrimonious exit in May from a role spearheading federal cost-cutting. But Republicans who recently passed a domestic policy bill expected to add more than $3 trillion to the U.S. debt, as said the vote honored Trump's election campaign pledge to rein in runaway spending. And I'll take a moment on Beyond the Continent. When we return, Brazil's Supreme Court says ex-president Jair Bolsonaro facing a coup trial must wear monitoring device. We'll tell you more when we are back. Do stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. We're still in the U.S. anyway. At least 3 sheriff's deputies have been killed at the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department's training center after an explosive detonated near a vehicle inside the bomb squad compound. The incident, which occurred earlier on Friday morning, appears to be accidental, according to multiple reports. Emergency crews, including the FBI and Los Angeles County Fire Department, responded immediately. Attorney General Pam Bondi confirmed federal investigators are on site working to learn more. In nearby Canada, tensions are rising in the town of Aylmer over measles vaccine acceptance. According to World Health Organization, data updated on July 9, Canada is facing a spike of more than 3,000 confirmed cases and ranks 9th globally, just behind Nigeria. Canada, which officially eradicated measles in 1998, has recorded more cases of the virus this year than the United States, despite having roughly 300 million fewer people. Different communities in Canada have been hit, but experts link the brunt of the outbreak to anti-vaccine Anabaptist groups in the provinces of Ontario and Alberta.
Are alive because of effective vaccines. They would not be around if we hadn't come up with vaccines to eradicate polio, all these things. Some of those would never have risen to the position of leadership that they are, because they would have probably died in their childhood. We have pockets of unvaccinated persons, and we knew that if measles happened to get into one of those pockets, it would be a serious outbreak. Seeing that we are Canadians and we've eradicated measles and we were living in a safe place for a long while, seeing this outbreak has been really difficult to watch unfold as a...
Away from that, the United Nations says cuts to humanitarian budgets, including to governments hosting refugees, are creating a deadly cocktail. In a new report, the agency highlighted a deadly confluence of factors pummeling millions of refugees and displaced people globally: rising displacement, shrinking funding, and political apathy. Dramatic aid cuts by the United States and other countries have left UNHCR and other aid organizations facing gaping shortfalls.
Being hit. These women-led organizations are being hit. Governments that are hosting refugees are being hit. I said it at the beginning, that's a deadly cocktail. That is not good news for the world. Our funding requirements for 2025 are of $10.6 billion. At this point in the year, we're usually at about, and I've done these types of briefings before, we're usually at maybe about 50%, 48%. At this point, we are at 23% of the needs.
Let's take you to the Americas, where former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has lashed out at the Supreme Court's order to wear an electronic monitoring device, which, while awaiting a verdict in his coup plotting, Bolsonaro is accused of seeking to stay in power by overturning the 2022 election won by his left-wing opponent, current President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. He described the top court judgment as a supreme humiliation. Judge Alexandre de Moraes, our Bolsonaro adversary, who is overseeing the trial, now in its final stages, said the far-right leader and his son Eduardo had incited hostile acts against Brazil.
Restrito a Brasília, com tornozeleira, fizeram a busca e apreensão em casa, pegaram R$7 mil e aproximadamente $14 mil, tudo devidamente aí com origem. Então, no momento, é um novo inquérito, eu estou também dentro dele. A suspeita é um exagero. Poxa, eu sou ex-presidente da República, tenho 70 anos de idade. Suprema humilhação.
Presidente, só acha que
É a quarta busca e apreensão em cima de...
Meanwhile, protesters in Brazil's economic capital of Sao Paulo rallied on Friday in defense of jobs, local businesses, and national sovereignty. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to impose 50% tariffs on Latin America's largest economy. The July 9 announcement, in which Trump vows steep tariffs as retaliation for what he calls a witch hunt against his far-right ally Jair Bolsonaro, has drawn criticism in Brazil. Demonstrators staged a symbolic arrest of both leaders by dressing up as Trump and Bolsonaro, complete with police uniforms. We move away now to tell you that emergency crews have rescued 18 workers trapped in a gold mine in Colombia. After the 12-hour emergency rescue operation in northwest Colombia, the National Mining Agency on X reported that they were all found to be in good health. The workers, who were trapped underground for about 18 hours because of an equipment failure, walked out of the mine one by one in blue jumpsuits and yellow helmets. The workers became trapped on Thursday in a mine in town of Remedios in Antioquia department. Sirens were sounded across Buenos Aires to mark the 31st anniversary of the deadly July 18, 1994 bombing of the Argentine Israelite Mutual Association Jewish Community Center. The deadly attack, which occurred at 9:53 a.m. local time, same time the sirens sounded, killed 85 and injured over 300. President Javier Milei, alongside his sister Karina, Secretary General of the Presidency, attended the ceremony under tight security. Earlier this year, Argentina's Congress approved legislation enabling trials in absentia for 10 suspects, 7 Iranian and 3 Lebanese charged in the atrocity. Still in Argentina, thousands of health workers and supporters marched in Buenos Aires on Friday to support the Garrahan Pediatric Hospital. This is aimed at deepening cuts to Argentina's public care system under President Javier Milei's austerity plan. According to experts, government workers and advocates, President Milei's severe budget cuts to Argentina's public health system have led to a decline in care, particularly affecting cancer patients.
Lo que veo es la repercusión económica afecta a nuestros pacientes, desde el ajuste a la obra social de los jubilados, donde nosotros vemos cada vez más pacientes que caen al hospital por falta de medicación, porque no logran atenderse en los centros propios de esta obra social, gente que se cae de las obras sociales y llegan en estado de salud mucho más avanzados, porque lamentablemente esperan a último momento a consultar, y guardias llenas, compañeros cansados,
And talking about Israeli settlers' attacks, heads of Christian churches in Jerusalem and members of diplomatic missions on Thursday visited the central West Bank village of Tebei, where residents blamed Israeli settlers for a spate of recent attacks in cassocks and suits, respectively. They answered the call from the local town hall and priests to meet residents affected by the violence and to see for themselves the arson damage on the remains of a Byzantine church. The European Union's representative in the Palestinian territories, Alexander Stutzman, pointed to the sanctions imposed by the bloc on certain settlers and their organizations and said attacks were undermining the process for peace.
Che la unica legge è quella del potere, di chi ha la forza, insomma, e non il diritto.
We join voices with the local priests, Greek Orthodox, Latin, the Greek Catholic, issuing a clear plea for support in the face of repeated systematic attacks from these radicals, which are only growing more frequent.
Very often they're armed. And if they're not armed, we know that there's another one that is armed that is not far away. And there's always the army. So the people try to avoid them because they know that if there's any escalation, it can become violent, and eventually it's us who will pay the price.
In Marseille, France's second largest city, a surge in cocaine and crack use is putting a spotlight on the deepening crisis of urban poverty. Local charities warn that the number of users in the city center has doubled in just 2 years as economic hardship fuels addiction and overwhelms support services. Recent estimates by aid organizations indicate that roughly 2,000 people are now injecting or smoking cocaine and crack in central Marseille, compared to about 1,000 2 years ago.
C'est un gros problème. Et les gens, ils ne s'en aperçoivent pas, mais s'ils continuent comme ça à nous refuser la salle de consommation, ils vont voir ce qui va se passer après. Hein. Ça va être la jungle des chez jungle.
On a une mauvaise image de l'usager de drogue. On pense que c'est des voleurs, des criminels, etc. En fait, des clichés des médias. Et en fait, c'est difficile parce qu'en fait, plus tu es abandonné, isolé, plus tu te renfermes sur toi-même, et puis tu vas vers la déchéance pour certaines personnes. Donc, si elles se sentent isolées, elles s'isolent encore plus. Et de pas avoir des lieux comme ça, et en fait, ça isole encore d'autant plus les personnes, et notamment les jeunes aussi.
And that's all on Beyond the Continent at this hour. Don't forget that you can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen, and also follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Watch us live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV 23, StarTimes 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onobanjo.